The morning I finally stopped crying was the morning I called my bank. Not to check my balance, not to dispute a charge. I called to give them a list of names, my mother, my older sister, and my brother-in-law, and I told them to revoke every single authorization I had ever granted. The accounts, the cards, the automatic transfers, all of it. The woman on the phone paused for just a second. "Are you sure you want to remove all authorized users, ma'am?" "Every single one," I said. I wasn't shaking. That surprised me more than anything. Let me go back 3 days, because that's where this story actually starts. Even though, if I'm being honest with myself, it started years before that. It started the day I got my first real paycheck, and my mother looked at it and smiled like she'd just won something. My name is Serena. I'm 31 years old. I'm a software engineer at a mid-sized tech company in Austin, and for 6 years of my career, my savings, my youth, I quietly, invisibly funded a lifestyle for my family that they never once acknowledged, let alone thanked me for. My mother lives in a 4-bedroom house in a suburb of Nashville. The mortgage is in my name. Has been since I was 25, when she called me crying and said the landlord was raising rent and she didn't know what she was going to do, and I, fresh out of my second job promotion, wanting so desperately to be a good daughter, said, "Mom, let me handle it." My older sister, Rachel, and her husband, Troy, live 40 minutes away in a townhouse that I also co-signed for. Troy hasn't held a steady job in 3 years. Rachel does part-time bookkeeping for a local salon and tells everyone she's basically the office manager. Every month, automatic transfers left my checking account. Mom's mortgage, $1,640. Rachel and Troy's rent assistance, $900 Spartak. My mother's car insurance, because she let hers lapse twice and couldn't get a reasonable rate anymore, $280. Various emergencies that came in texts with no greeting and no explanation, just a Venmo request and a dollar amount, averaged maybe $400 a month. I want to be clear about something. I never talked about this money. I never brought it up at holidays. I never held it over anyone's head. Part of me believed that's what good families did. You helped, quietly, without expecting a parade. Part of me, the part I wasn't ready to look at until recently, just wanted them to love me. They didn't know the full picture. Or at least that's what I told myself. Rachel knew I helped with rent. My mother knew about the mortgage. Neither of them knew about the other's arrangement, and neither of them knew the full total. I had kept it all carefully separated in my head, the way you do when you're trying to convince yourself something is manageable. It was manageable. Until it wasn't. 3 days before I made that phone call, my company held its annual anniversary gala. It's a big deal. The company's been around for 20 years, and this one was the milestone celebration. Venue downtown, open bar, spouses and partners invited, the whole thing. I'd been given a small award that year for leading a successful product migration, and my manager had told me in advance that I'd be called up to the stage. I was nervous and proud in equal measure. I made the mistake of inviting my mother. She'd been asking to visit Austin for months. The timing seemed right. I bought her a plane ticket, put her up in my apartment, took 2 days off to show her around. I wanted her to see my life. I wanted her to be proud of me in person, in that room, in front of my colleagues. I should have known better. The night of the gala, I wore a black dress I'd had for 2 years. Simple, fitted, nothing flashy. My mother came out of the bathroom in a floor-length emerald gown she'd apparently packed without mentioning, full jewelry, the works. She looked beautiful, actually. She always does. She has that quality where she fills a room. The first thing she said when she saw me was, "That's what you're wearing?" I said yes, that's what I was wearing. She gave me a look. The one I've been receiving my whole life. The slight tightening around the eyes that means you have disappointed me, and said, "I just thought, for something like this, you'd dress the part." I let it go. I was good at letting things go. Years of practice. The evening started well enough. My colleagues were warm, the food was good, I had a glass of wine and started to relax. My mother was charming with everyone she met, laughing and touching people's arms. She's always been better with strangers than with me. Then came the moment on the stage. My manager read the award description, the project details, the outcome, the impact. There was applause. Real applause, not polite applause. I walked up, shook hands, said a few words, and when I came back to our table, my face was warm and I was genuinely happy. My mother was on her phone. She didn't look up, didn't say congratulations, didn't say anything until I sat down, and then she said quietly but not quietly enough, "I just don't understand why they made such a big deal of it. It's just a computer thing." The woman sitting next to us, a senior architect named Priya, who I respect enormously, heard it. I watched Priya's face go carefully neutral. I said, "Mom, can we not?" "I'm just saying," she said. "Your cousin Jess just made partner at her firm. That's the kind of thing you put on a banner." I excused myself to go to the restroom. I stood at the sink for a while. I looked at myself in the mirror. I thought about the mortgage payment that had left my account 4 days ago. $1,640. I thought about Rachel's text from 2 weeks prior. "Hey, can you do 500 this month? We're a little short." No hello, no explanation. I had sent it. I went back to the table. The rest of the evening, I was somewhere else in my head. When my manager came over to chat, my mother somehow turned the conversation toward herself within 90 seconds. Her garden, the Nashville real estate market, a trip she was thinking about taking. My manager smiled and nodded. I smiled and nodded. On the way home in the Uber, my mother said, "That Priya seems full of herself." I didn't say anything. And the food was just okay. The salmon was dry. Silence from me. "Serena." She turned to look at me directly. "I'm just giving you my honest opinion. You should want feedback from your mother." I nodded. I didn't sleep that night. I lay on my side of the bed. I'd given her my room and was on an air mattress in my home office. And I just thought. I thought about 6 years of transfers. I thought about the Christmas 3 years ago when Rachel opened the KitchenAid stand mixer I'd saved up for and said, "Oh, I actually wanted the other color," and put it back in the box. I thought about my mother telling me at Thanksgiving 2 years ago that I needed to think about whether I really wanted to be a career woman, or if that was just what I'd settled for. I thought about every time I'd said nothing, absorbed it, patted the wound with another bank transfer. Another paid bill, another proof of love that was never named. I thought, they don't even know I'm the one holding this up. And somehow that was the thing that broke me open. Not the comment at the gala. Not the years of small cuts. The invisibility. The fact that I had constructed this entire financial scaffolding around their lives, and they were so thoroughly unaware of it, or chose to be, that my mother could sit next to me in an Uber after an evening where I'd been recognized in front of 200 people and tell me the salmon was dry. I wasn't angry yet. I was something quieter and more final than angry. My mother flew home the next morning. We hugged the departure's curb. She said the flight was too early and Austin traffic was impossible. I said I'd talk to her soon. I drove home and I sat at my kitchen table and I opened a spreadsheet. I'd never actually added it all up before. I think, on some level, I hadn't wanted to. I added it up now. Over 6 years, adjusting for the irregular transfers, the emergencies, the insurance, $214,000. Give or take. I sat with that number for a long time. Then I picked up my phone. I didn't call my mother. I didn't call my mother. I opened my banking app, and I started removing authorizations. Then I called to confirm. Then I called the insurance company. Then I logged into the payment portal for my mother's mortgage, and I removed the auto pay. I want to say I felt sad. I did feel sad, underneath everything, in a place I wasn't touching right then. But on the surface, I felt something I hadn't felt in years, something so unfamiliar I almost didn't recognize it. I felt like myself. I went to work, I came home, I made dinner, I watched something on TV, I slept 8 hours. The first text came from Rachel 3 days later. I know what you're thinking. 3 days? But here's the thing about being the invisible financial support system for people who don't acknowledge you exist in that role. They don't notice until a bill bounces or a card gets declined. Rachel's text came at 7:48 in the morning. Hey, our account says the rent transfer didn't come through. Can you check? I read it. I put my phone face down. I went to make coffee. Her second text came at 9:15. Serena. Her third came at 11, and the tone had shifted. This is really not a good time for this. I need you to handle this. I turned my phone over. I typed, I've made some changes to my automatic transfers. I won't be sending that anymore. I put the phone down again and watched the typing bubble appear and disappear 4 times before her response came through. What does that mean? What changes? Are you okay? I almost laughed. The first real question she'd directed at my well-being in I don't know how long. I didn't respond. My mother called that evening. I let it go to voicemail. She left one. I could hear the controlled tension in her voice, the thing she does, where she sounds calm, but each word is very, very deliberate, saying that Rachel had called her and was upset, and that she hoped I wasn't doing something rash, and that we should talk. I listened to it twice. I didn't call back. The next morning she called again. This time I picked up. She didn't ask how I was. She said, Serena, what is going on? Rachel says you stopped her transfer. I said, that's right, I've stopped all the transfers. Silence. Then, all of them? Yes. What does that mean for the mortgage? And here's the moment I had rehearsed in my head, the sentence I had turned over and over the night before until it felt smooth and solid. The mortgage comes out of an account you're no longer authorized on. If you want to make the payment, you'll need to make it directly. Another silence, longer this time. Serena. Her voice had changed. Softer now, which was somehow worse. Sweetheart, I don't understand what's happening. Did I do something? I had spent a long time deciding how much to say. I'd considered several versions of this conversation. The version where I listed every grievance. The version where I stayed cold and clinical. The version where I cried and asked her why it had never been enough. I had decided on honesty. Calm, clear, non-negotiable honesty. Mom, I said, do you know how much money I've sent to you and Rachel in the past 6 years? She hesitated. You've helped out here and there, $214,000. I said it the way you'd read a number off a report. The mortgage, the rent assistance for Rachel and Troy, your car insurance, the transfers when you asked. 6 years. Silence. I didn't know it was that much, she said finally. I know you didn't, I said. And I believed her, actually. That was almost the saddest part. She hadn't known because she hadn't looked, because it had come easily and consistently and I had never made it a thing, and so it had just been air. Just part of how things worked. Serena, we can talk about this. We're talking about it, I said. I want you to know why I made this decision. It wasn't about the money. It was about the gala. It was about the mixer Rachel put back in the box. It was about Thanksgiving. It was about a lot of things over a lot of years where I felt like what I contributed didn't matter because none of you saw it. She started to say something about the gala, how she hadn't meant anything by it, how she was just being honest. I know, I said. That's kind of the point. I told her I loved her. I told her I wasn't disappearing from her life, that I still wanted a relationship with her, but that the financial arrangement was over. I told her I'd give her 60 days to make other arrangements on the mortgage before I would have to consider other options for the property. She cried. I stayed steady. When I hung up, I sat very still for a minute. My hands were in my lap. Through my kitchen window, the Austin sky was that specific deep blue it gets in the early evening in October, and some neighbor was mowing their lawn, and somewhere a dog was barking, and it was all extremely ordinary, and I was sitting inside it feeling, for the first time in years, like I was actually present in my own life. Rachel didn't take it as well. She called that night and skipped the soft opening entirely. Her voice, when I picked up, was already elevated. I don't know what Mom said to you or what happened at that work thing, but you cannot just pull the rug out like this. We have a lease, Serena. We have commitments. I let her finish. Then I said, you and Troy are adults. I'm confident you can figure out your housing situation. That is so, she stopped. Do you know how cold that sounds? Probably, I said. I've been pretty warm for a long time, and I'm not sure it helped either of us. She said I was being selfish. She said I had always made everything about my career. She said she'd supported me emotionally my whole life, which landed somewhere between ironic and genuinely painful, because in the way she believed it, it might even have been partially true. She had been there for certain things. She had. Families are complicated. I didn't say any of that. I said I was sorry she was in a difficult position and that I hoped she and Troy would find their footing. She hung up. Then the texts started. Not from Rachel, from Troy. I had maybe a dozen total texts from Troy in 6 years. He was not a texter, or not with me anyway. Now, suddenly, he found the app. They came in over 2 days, escalating in tone, first a question, then a request, then something that was pretty close to a threat. Something about how co-signing the lease meant I had obligations and he knew people in real estate law. I read each one once and didn't respond. I did, however, forward them to my own attorney. I'd called her the day after my conversation with my mother. She told me what I needed to know about the mortgage and the lease, what my obligations were, what they weren't. She helped me understand the difference between what I had legally committed to and what I had been giving voluntarily for years. Troy could say what he wanted. I'd been advised. About 3 weeks later, my mother called me again. This time the conversation was different. Quieter on both sides. She said she'd talked to Rachel and they were figuring things out. Rachel and Troy were looking at apartments. My mother had spoken to a financial counselor, which nearly made me drop the phone, because in 31 years, I had never once heard her use the phrase financial counselor. She didn't apologize, exactly. That's not her way. But she said, I've been thinking about what you said. About not seeing it? She paused for a long time. I think you were right that I didn't look. It wasn't everything. It wasn't a Hollywood ending with violins. But it was real, and it was more than I'd expected, and I held it carefully. I'm telling you this because I spent years believing that the way to hold my family together was to hold it together financially, invisibly, without asking for acknowledgement or thanks. I believed that need was love, that relying on me meant they wanted me around. I have since learned, in a process that is still ongoing and not always pretty, that that was not love. That was a role I had accepted and then maintained because stepping out of it felt like abandonment. Letting go of it was not abandonment. Letting go of it was the first real boundary I had ever set with the people who were supposed to teach me what boundaries were. My mother and I talk on the phone on Sundays. We're careful with each other. It's not the closeness I always wanted, but it's honest in a way we've never managed before, and I'll take honest, overperformed warmth any day. Rachel and Troy found a 2-bedroom apartment. Troy got a job, a real one, with benefits. I don't know if my stopping the transfers had anything to do with that, or if it was coincidence, or if he'd been capable all along and there had simply been no reason to try. I have thought about that a lot. I didn't save $214,000 so I could watch them be okay. I spent it and they took it and here we are. But I wake up every morning in my own apartment, with my own budget, my own choices, and the complete knowledge that anything good in my life was built by me, for me, because I decided it was worth building. That's not nothing. Actually, right now, it feels like everything. I've thought a lot about what actually happened. Not the phone calls, not the transfers, not even the night of the gala. I mean, what happened underneath all of it, in the years before I found the nerve to stop. Here's what I've come to understand. When you consistently give without being seen, you don't just lose money, you lose the habit of knowing what you're worth. Every transfer I sent without acknowledgement, every comment I absorbed without pushing back, every Christmas and Thanksgiving where I smiled through something that stung. Each one of those moments was a small vote I cast against myself. I didn't know that's what I was doing. I thought I was being generous. I thought I was being strong. But there's a version of generosity that's really just fear wearing a nicer outfit, and I was fluent in it. The thing about Rachel putting that mixer back in the box, or my mother pulling out her phone while I was on stage, those moments didn't hurt because the people were cruel. They hurt because I had worked so hard to earn something from them, and I kept offering it up, and they kept not noticing, and I kept telling myself that if I just gave a little more, a little longer, eventually the ledger would balance. It doesn't work that way. A ledger that only one person is watching will never balance, because the other person doesn't know there's a ledger. What my mother said in that Uber, "The salmon was dry, your cousin made partner," that wasn't malice. That was just who she was when she didn't have to try. And she didn't have to try because I had never made her. That's the part that took me a while to sit with. Not that she failed me, but that I had made it so easy for her to. Serena from 6 years ago would have gone home from that gala, cried privately, sent the next transfer on the first of the month, and told herself that family was complicated. And she would have been right. Family is complicated. But complicated doesn't mean you have to fund the complication indefinitely while being told the salmon is dry. The decision I made wasn't about punishment. Troy's texts, Rachel's panic, my mother's careful silence, none of that was the point. The point was that I had finally done the math. Not just the dollar amount, though $214,000 has a way of clarifying things. The real math was simpler. What was I getting, and what was it costing me, and was the exchange honest? It wasn't. It had never been. And the moment I admitted that to myself, the rest followed naturally. I think about Priya's face going carefully neutral when my mother made that comment. Priya, who has watched me work, who knows what that project cost me in late nights, and pressure and problem solving. She heard it and said nothing, because it wasn't her place. But I saw her see it, and something about being witnessed in that moment, even silently, helped me see it too. You build a life through the choices you make consistently, not the grand gestures you make once. I made consistent choices for 6 years that said their comfort matters more than my clarity. Then I made a different choice, and I've been making it every day since. That's not a lightning bolt. That's just deciding and then deciding again and then again. It's quieter than I expected, and it's mine.